want to be a better person and follow suit and do the same thing. Everyone on her campaign is very kind to each other. It's given me a new purpose every day that I wake up. When I'm wearing my Tulsi gear, I'm reminded of what I'm representing. And that is a cause that is just and mighty, folks. This is the real deal. Pardon me. So every chance I get, I watch her, and I'm reminded that we can make a difference, starting individually with how we treat each other and ourselves. She's like a lighthouse to me. She's a beacon of hope, and this time of year, I think it's so important that we have gratitude and hope. And I can only imagine if this is just how one person reacts to her, how she could lead a whole entire country. We do live in the greatest country on earth, and we need the greatest president. And to me, that's going to be Tulsi Gabbard. Without any further ado, please help me welcome Congresswoman and Major in the National Guard, Tulsi Gabbard. Hi, Tulsi. How are you? I'm so sorry.
Well done. Can you give Bet a round of applause, please? This is her first time doing this.
Thank you.
Bet is one of our amazing volunteer organizers, do everything people that we have as part of our team here. I guess I'll stand up here. That's what this is for. Thank you, Bet. That was wonderful. You did fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's not easy to get up in front of people. I want to say a couple other quick thanks here before we get started. Josh Boulay, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Josh is the owner. Boulay, thank you, Josh Boulay. Is Josh here? There he is, awesome. Thank you, Josh. Sorry for saying your name wrong. Thank you. He's the owner of this wonderful establishment. Thank you for all of your help in setting this up and taking care of our volunteers as they were setting up today. Thank you, Josh. I want to say thanks to the building manager, Marie, who has been very helpful in getting this together, as well as Mario and Denise Plant, who own this building. So it takes many, many hands. Most of all, thanks to all of you for coming and being here today. It's great to see you. It's great to be here in Nashua. I'm going to open up with just some very brief remarks, but I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we'll have here tonight. Bet talked a little bit about hope and opportunity and how we as a nation, at our core, are indivisible. Our founders had an amazing vision for us. They envisioned that our country would be one led by leaders truly committed to serving the people of this country as their sole mission, and that we would have a government of leaders who are of the people, by the people, and for the people. We don't have that today. Instead, we have leaders a government that is essentially of, by, and for the elite and the rich and powerful. Those who can afford the high-powered lobbyists, those who can put their money into this pay-to-play culture that exists in Washington that benefits those very few and leaves we the people behind. We can see the detrimental impacts of this in virtually every single aspect of our lives. And we look at how many people across this country are struggling, where 70 to 80% of people are working paycheck to paycheck, struggling just to pay the bills, keep a roof over their head, pay for medicine, food, the basic necessities, just one emergency away from total financial disaster or bankruptcy or seeing themselves being put out on the street. How is this possible here in the greatest and wealthiest nation in the world? It's because of the fact that our policies across the board, healthcare, housing, tax code, trade policy, infrastructure, you go on and on, education, you go down the list, and we see how these policies are benefiting, once again, those who thrive off of a pay-to-play corrupt culture in Washington, while everyday Americans are working hard every day and yet are still struggling just to survive, without the peace of mind of all of this hard work leading to greater opportunity, to a better future with prosperity, not just for themselves, but for their kids. So as we look at many of these issues, and I look forward to having a conversation about them, it's important that we understand the root cause of the problem so that we can solve it. And that's the beauty of this democracy and that vision that our founders had for us, that when they wrote the Constitution, they started with the most three important words so that we wouldn't miss them. We the people. We the people. Our leaders and their future, the future of this country, this lies within our hands. We are the ones who can make this change, who can bring about this reality of a government of, by, and for the people. You have my personal commitment that my first responsibility is to serve you. As your president, putting the well-being and the interests of people ahead of profits, people ahead of politics, setting aside all of the differences that we may have, whether they be based on political affiliation or race or ethnicity or orientation or education or where we sit in society, social classes, all of that goes to the wayside, where you know that as your president, I respect every single one of you, every single American, and wake up every single day committed to fulfilling that responsibility of putting service above self, of doing my very best every day to work for the well-being and the interests of each and every one of you, the American people, and knowing that this is how we can get our country back on track. This is how together, joining hands, working side by side, we usher in a better and brighter future that ensures equality and justice, respect and dignity, opportunity and prosperity for every single American. And the way that this all starts, right? The way that this all starts is with respect, with what we in Hawaii call aloha. We greet each other with aloha, not because it means hello, but because it means respect. It's a reminder of who we all are, that we are all brothers and sisters, that we are all connected. We greet each other with aloha. We are recognizing that we are all children of God, that we treat each other with respect, as that being the foundation for us to be able to overcome those differences we may have and work together towards finding that common ground. This is something that I've done my best to bring to Washington, bringing this aloha spirit to Washington, to the work that we are trying to do there. I got elected in 2012 as a Democrat in a very strong Republican majority. And a lot of people questioned, well, God, how are you going to get anything done? Republicans are in charge. You're a Democrat. You're from a small state. You're not very important in their bigger scheme of things. But I began with thinking about how can I build relationships based on respect? How do I reach out? How do I cross these divides? How do I start working with people from a completely different part of the country and find that common ground? Well, I started with the most universal language that I know, which is food. I called my mother back in Hawaii and I asked if she would make 434 boxes of the most delicious, amazing macadamia nut toffee anybody has ever seen. She's incredible. She said, yes, of course, I think that's a good idea. I said, I have one more favor to ask on top of that. Can you make another 435 bigger boxes of toffee for the staff of every member of Congress? She paused just for a moment to think about how much longer that was going to take her, but she understood why it was important. And so she said, yeah, okay, I can do this. It will take a little bit longer, but we'll get it done. And so she's in Hawaii getting this toffee prepared. My dad is checking the quality of every single pan that she poured, taking a little slice just to be sure. I was handwriting personal notes to every one of my new colleagues in Congress, introducing myself to them and signing every note, just saying, I look forward to serving with you. The response that we got from delivering these little gifts of aloha to people was really amazing. That so quickly I was seeing on the House floor during votes, the only time that we're all gathered together on any given day in the same room, Republicans started making that long walk from their side of the floor to the Democrat side of the floor, looking for me, finding me, and just saying thank you. I ate all the candy. I need more to take home for my family this weekend. Please, do you have a stash somewhere? And then most importantly, saying, Tulsi, tell me what issues your constituents in Hawaii are most concerned about. What do you want to work on now that you're here? Let's find a way to work together. I'm the chair of this committee, or I've been working on this issue or that issue. Let's do something together. That simple gesture of reaching out with respect, without any preconditions, without any purity test or litmus test, or, well, you know what, you're not part of my team or my tribe, so I'm not going to talk to you. No, reaching out to every person with respect, connecting as people, so that as leaders elected to Congress, we could work together to fulfill our mission of service, something that I take very seriously. It is an awesome responsibility. This sense of unity of mission is what we need back in our government that unfortunately that's been lost. Something that I experienced through my service in the military, where from day zero at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, we showed up to basic combat training, all of us standing there at the position of attention around this huge room, people from all parts of the country, the real representation of the diversity of this country. We all were there for one reason. Every one of us had volunteered and taken an oath to serve our country, to support and uphold our Constitution, to protect and defend the American people. I felt that same sense of unity when I was deployed, where we didn't ask each other, well, I got your back if you're with my party, but if not, no. None of that existed. We knew that those serving to our left and right would have our back and would put their lives on the line to save us. And us, them. That sense of unity and purpose and mission of service to our country is the leadership that I will bring as your president, where we can really start to fix the systemic problems that we have in this country. Where as president, I will hold big pharma and big insurance accountable who have been profiting off the backs of sick people in this country for far too long. I want to recognize AARP, who's here. They have these amazing shirts that say, "Stop greed, cut drug prices now." Speaking of a government of, by, and for the rich and powerful, Big Pharma pays more for lobbyists and PACs in Washington than they do on those commercials we see running all day, every day on TV. So it comes as no surprise that in our healthcare system that's supposed to be for us, Big Pharma has these incredible carve-outs that stop our government, the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in the world, from negotiating lower drug prices. How is that possible? It's only possible when we have a government that's working for them instead of working for us. Under my administration, Big Pharma and Big Insurance have no seat at the table as we are putting forward legislation that will truly guarantee quality health care for every single American, while allowing for you, if you want to purchase private insurance or supplementary insurance, that's fine. That's up to you. This is America. It's a free country, but no person in this country who is sick and in need of care gets left behind. As your president, I'll enact real criminal justice reform, bringing people together from both parties, people across party lines who recognize that it is long past time that we end the failed war on drugs, that we don't allow another generation to fall victim to this failed war on drugs. We end the federal marijuana prohibition. I have the only bipartisan bill in Congress that would do this. And that we start to bring about the kind of real reforms we need to see. Real sentencing reforms, ending mandatory minimums, bringing about an end to this school to prison pipeline that begins younger and younger and younger with our kids these days. looking at the root causes of these problems and bringing about solutions, holding Big Pharma accountable, truly accountable for the opioid epidemic that is ravaging so many people's lives across this country. I have legislation called the Opioid Accountability Act that would provide federal prosecutors with the tools they need to really hold companies like Purdue Pharma accountable for the lies and the cheating that they have conducted to proliferate these highly addictive drugs on our streets, and to take the money that comes from that prosecution and dedicate it solely and directly towards recovery and treatment for those who have been most harmed because of this epidemic. As president, I'll take action to protect our environment. Climate change presents very real threats before us, but we look at where is the gridlock? Why aren't we doing more as a country to be able to address these threats that don't just impact some of us in some part of the country, but not others? It impacts all of us. It's because of how polarizing this political environment has become. So let's set aside the politically charged word, unfortunately, that climate change has become, and just focus on the very real necessities that everyone needs to exist. Every living being needs clean water. Every one of us, our pets, our family members, our loved ones, we need clean water to survive. We need clean air to breathe. We all want to make sure that these beautiful places that we get to call home remain for our kids and their kids and their kids if they want to stay here and raise their own families here. I come from a beautiful state in Hawaii. I grew up playing in the ocean and hiking in the mountains, and protecting our home wasn't something my parents had to teach me. It wasn't something that I had to learn in school. It was natural. It was part of our culture. It was part of our upbringing. You take care of the things that you care about, and you want to protect them. And really, that's what we're talking about when we want to take action to end the nearly $30 billion in subsidies that coming out of our pockets to pay for the big fossil fuel industry. Let's instead look at how we can invest resources into a clean, renewable energy economy that creates good-paying jobs, that creates more economic and energy stability for our country, and that protects our environment. And oh, by the way, is costing us less, more and more as technology evolves, than the archaic fossil fuel industry we've been so dependent on for so long. This is about finding a common sense approach to solving the challenges and the problems that face us all. There's a number of other issues. We don't have time to address every one, but I want to close on one that is central to every other issue that we face, and that issue is the cost of war. How many of you saw Afghanistan in the news today? A few of you. There was an article that was published in the Washington Post that linked to, I think, thousands of pages of documents that came from the government that were gotten through a Freedom of Information request that basically pointed to how for nearly 2 decades we, the American people, have been lied to about where our taxpayer dollars are going in Afghanistan and why. Now, if any of you have heard me say anything before, you know that I have been very focused on how we must end the waste and abuse that has gone on in our country's waging of these regime change wars, toppling dictators in other countries for so long that has cost us tremendously in American lives, cost tremendously in the lives of the people in the countries where we wage these wars, and that have cost us as taxpayers over $6 trillion since 9/11 alone. These are wars that have undermined our national security, strengthened terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, wars that we've waged in places like Iraq and Syria and Libya, and this ongoing war in Afghanistan where people are questioning more and more, what are we doing there? We're still spending $4 billion every single month in Afghanistan right now. Where are these dollars going? What objective are we trying to accomplish? How does that serve the best interests of our national security or the people of our country? And the harsh truth is, which is revealed in this article and these documents, is it has not served our national security interests. nearly $1 trillion or over $1 trillion in Afghanistan alone has not been going to fight terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS to keep us safe. No. It's been going to defense contractors, the McKinsey Group, a consulting group. It's been going to private contractors to go and do this work in Afghanistan to build a little mini America there, to try to root out corruption in their government, to do all of these things. Towards what objective? These are things that the Afghan people themselves, only the Afghan people, can do for themselves and for their future. One of the so I mentioned, we're spending $4 billion every month in Afghanistan right now. We are hearing about proposed cuts to food stamps coming out of this administration that would save taxpayers $5 billion over 5 years. That same amount of money is what we're spending in Afghanistan in 5 weeks. Just to put these things in context. Some of the things that are cited in that article this morning is a government worker was in Afghanistan doing work for USAID, and their instructions were to spend $3 million a day in every town where they were doing work. Not to spend $3 million to do this or that or this or that. Nope, make sure you spend $3 million a day in every town that you're doing your work. And apparently this person had asked a visiting member of Congress who had gone there to Afghanistan, what would you do in your community with $3 million a day? How quickly could you spend that, and what would you spend it on? And that member of Congress said, I couldn't spend it that quickly. The cost of war has taken a tremendous toll on our country in immeasurable ways in the lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform who never came home, whose families were forced to greet them at Dover Air Force Base as they stood there and watched the coffin unloaded from that airplane, draped with the American flag. The cost of these continuing wars that have nothing to do with strengthening our national security take a toll on every single one of us in every single community in this country as they take more and more money out of our pockets and out of the things that we need here at home. As our own government lies to us about what it's being spent on and how it's supposed to help us somehow. This must end. Enough is enough. No more lies. This is where the choice that you have before you as voters here in New Hampshire matters so much. And I know you take this responsibility as first in the nation very seriously. Experience matters. So as you're thinking about who best to lead us out of this mess, to bring our troops home from Afghanistan, to end these regime change wars, work to end this new Cold War and nuclear arms race, it's taken more money out of our pockets and making the world and us less safe. Let's redirect our taxpayer dollars towards actually serving the needs of the American people, actually serving the needs of our communities and our loved ones. This is the change that I will bring about as your president and commander-in-chief, bringing the experience that I have of serving in Congress for 7 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee, on the Armed Services Committee, on the Homeland Security Committee, focused on our national security interests and our foreign policy, combined with the experience that I just have personally as a soldier, still serving in the Army National Guard now for almost 17 years. That experience that I got serving overseas in the Middle East on 2 deployments where I saw firsthand every day the terribly high human cost of war. These experiences have prepared me to be able to walk in on day one to fulfill that responsibility as Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces, and gives you the peace of mind that I will remain very focused on that mission of service and putting country first every single day, and never bowing to the interests of the military-industrial complex and the foreign policy establishment that's gotten us into this mess in the first place. Thank you. If this is the kind of leadership that you would like to see in our country, I want to personally invite every single one of you to join us, to join this movement that we are building so that we can together work side by side to get our priorities on track in this country, to bring about the kind of fresh leadership that we so desperately need, that will lead us to a government that is actually serving the people. Thank you very much for your attention, your time, and your consideration. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of people here with microphones. I want to make sure we hopefully get to as many questions as we can. There you go, Vince.
Through the intelligence cooperation with the U.S., Israel is saving American lives every week. What steps will you take to deepen the ties between the U.S. and Israel?
I think the U.S. and Israel has long been and will continue to be allies. I think there is a greater ability for the United States to be a force for good in the conflict in the Middle East, specifically between Israel and Palestine. I don't think it calls our alliance between our countries into question when we examine how some of the decisions that this administration has taken have unfortunately helped to derail the peace process more and more. And I think it's continuing to lead down a very dangerous path. So I think there's more that can and should be done to try to be a positive influence and a force for good, to try to bring both sides, leaders from Israel and Palestine together, because they are the only ones who can set the terms and conditions for this peace process to lead to a two-state solution where the people of both of these nations have a safe and secure home and peace of mind for their own future. Thank you. Where's the microphone? Go ahead.
Thank you, and welcome to Nashua.
Thank you.
What is your thought of how you would solve this just endless sea of drugs and heroin that is coming into this country? How would you solve that?
Look, I think that the failed war on drugs is actually a contributor towards this proliferation, number one. And number two, our priorities have been wrong as a country for so long in funneling people who are dealing with substance abuse and addiction into a broken criminal justice system, rather than dedicating those resources towards actually helping them to recover and deal with that addiction. I think the fact that we're taking folks who need help and treating them as criminals is something that's only perpetuating this problem and making it worse. I think I look to a country like Portugal that has shown how we can bring about reforms to our criminal justice laws and redirect those resources to a point where their addiction rates have dropped heavily. They're seeing their numbers of folks incarcerated for drugs have dropped tremendously, and they're actually seeing how the positive impact for people and on taxpayer dollars can happen when we're actually dedicating our resources to those who need help in a way that will actually help them. Thank you.
Hey, Tulsi, good to see you again. Heard a bunch of your ads on, I think it was Rock 101. One was about Social Security, and one was about helping the veterans, and overarching, to build the country for ourselves and our posterity, as in the General Welfare Clause. Say, number one, we don't need to order the Federal Reserve. We need to do away with the Federal Reserve and get back to the American system. Thank you.
It's nice to see you always. I'm so grateful you come to all of our town halls. Thank you very much, and you're continuing to advocate for that. I'm only one of a few members of Congress who's actually supported legislation to audit the Federal Reserve so that Congress and the American people can get a look at what's really going on there. Yes, sir.
Hi. Hello. Yep. Thank you for your continued service to the country.
Thank you.
And thank you for showing poise from the recent, what I think to be some callous attacks to your integrity and patriotism. But I'd like to talk about the environment. You're obviously a surfer. I like to talk about the plastics in the ocean. I'm sure you have a very strong opinion of that. I mean, what can we do?
Yeah. You're right. This one, it hits close to home. You know, when I first started stepping outside of my safe little world in Hawaii, it was because of the fact that when I'd go to the beach or go out surfing with my friends, either out in the water or on the beach, we're seeing more and more trash piling up. And so for us, it started with just saying, hey, let's go and, you know, spend an afternoon on the weekends going and cleaning up the beach, doing what we could in our own little way to improve our little slice of paradise. But as we're seeing, the problem is continuing to grow and grow at a massive global scale with single-use plastics creating an incredible amount of pollution in our oceans and in our environment as a whole. I think there's two major actions that we need to focus on to address this. One is just personal. You know, each of us can make big change with the choices that we make in our own lives and how we choose to spend our money and what we are choosing to use or not use just in our everyday lives, whether it's in cooking or shopping or whatever it is. And I think we can't underestimate the power of that, because that is what can often help drive change in the private sector. I think there's also a role for government to play. We're seeing more and more local communities already passing legislation or bills or ordinance to start to ban things like styrofoams and single-use plastics. I'm really proud my home community, a city council of City and County of Honolulu that I previously served on, they recently just voted to ban single-use plastics on our island of Oahu. It's a population almost 1 million people. And this bill is now sitting on the mayor's desk waiting for his signature. I think this is the actions that we can take to move closer and closer in the right direction, where we recognize how detrimental creating more waste in our environment is, and how we should start to relook at how the resources that we're using in our everyday lives can best be better resourced so that we're getting closer to being a society that doesn't create waste at all. Thank you. Where's,
Hi, Tulsi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that I love you and I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I love you back.
Thank you. I also wanted to give you a bit of perspective, because I know I do a lot of chat on YouTube and I follow a lot of what you're doing. And a lot of times all that I am able to write is Trump 2020, Tulsi Yang 2024. And the reason why I write this is because I feel like we're dealing, well, let me backtrack quick. I just apologize for my speaking abilities. I've never spoken in public, but I just helped administer my grandfather's estate, who was a member of the Air Force, and he helped to defeat communism in whatever way he did, even if it was in spirit. Yet, I removed maybe 2 American flags from his house and about 1,000 items that said China. The reason why I support Trump is because of his stance on China. I feel like that's our biggest threat to our democracy, specifically because the success of China is layered into our financial system and our pensions. So basically, there's an apathy amongst the boomers to dealing with such an insidious and communist regime. I wonder how you would stand up to China in a meaningful way and whether or not you have the wherewithal to withstand the pressures of the status quo and the powers that be that are hoping to keep that game going, and in every form. I'm rambling here, but
All right,
but
let me
thank
try
you
to
so
address
much.
your question. Thank you.
And just to finish, so I see our threefold agenda as decoupling from China, pulling our troops home to focus on home, which is why I support you and your vision. I don't know that we're there yet because I don't think people quite get the threat that China poses, and then eventually the establishment of a universal basic income to keep our consumption strong and our people non-exploitable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I agree with you on two out of your 3-point plan there. And I'll explain why. First of all, I think Trump has, I think all of us would probably agree that there are serious issues with regards to China, trade policy, trade imbalance, IP theft, and other issues. What I disagree with is the tactics that Trump is using to try to address these problems. Trump is very dangerously waging an ongoing trade and tariff war with a shoot from the hip, create uncertainty and destabilization approach, which has caused a lot of tremendous harm to domestic farmers, manufacturers, small business owners. You hear a lot about the big ones who are most impacted in the news sometimes, but I was here, where was I? I was in Peterborough the other day and was talking to a local small business owner there who was talking about how he doesn't purchase anything directly from China, but he purchases product for his business from a business that does purchase from China, and that the tariffs that continue to increase, those aren't being paid for by China, he says. We are paying for them. So I'm not saying that these issues don't need to be addressed. They need to be addressed through negotiations, through the use of diplomacy. Yes, using the toughness to be able to come in with a strong hand and leverage without escalating tensions with another nuclear-armed country, that is China. This is taking us in a very dangerous direction where if you continue to create uncertainty, destabilization, an economic war and a trade war can very quickly turn to a hot war. It is not in our best interest to go to war with China, period. Decoupling our economy from China, frankly, it's not realistic, and it's not in the best interest of our country. Our global economy has become so intertwined that we need to best make sure that as we're conducting these trade negotiations, whether it be with China or creating a new trade deal with another country, that we are negotiating with a strong hand and actually setting policy that's in the best interest of our small businesses and farmers and manufacturers and those who are creating jobs here in this country. We're the United States of America. We have a lot of leverage in these negotiations, and by putting the interest of our people first rather than the interest of multinational corporations, who are the ones who really often benefit from these trade deals, then we're able to be in a position where we are strengthening our economy, creating more jobs rather than outsourcing them, and creating a more stable future for people here at home, being a productive member of this global economy. I think the last thing I'll say on this is Trump has this approach of a win-lose mentality, a zero-sum game, that for the United States of America to win, other countries must lose. And at the very core of that, I completely disagree. We need to get rid of that mentality and approach things with a win-win mentality. There's a lot of common interests that we share with other countries in the world, whether it be related to economic concerns, security concerns, counterterrorism, climate change, and protecting our environment. We've got to be able to work together, and we cannot do that if we are operating from a position of creating conflict, uncertainty, and destabilization everywhere we go.
We have time for one more question, folks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sorry, the mic got to you too late. Thank you very much for being here and for your question. You're raising the concern of so many parents and so many families in this country who should not have to live in fear that when they drop their kid off at school that may be the last time that they see them. They should not having to be thinking about setting aside $200 or $300 to buy a bulletproof backpack for their kid to take to school. There are deep-seated issues and problems that we need to address. And I think it does start with passing sensible safety legislation related to guns to make sure that those few who seek to do harm to others are not able to so easily get their hands on a gun that would allow them to do mass harm and damage, as we've seen in schools and churches and synagogues and temples and supermarkets and gas stations. It's almost as though there is nowhere safe in this country. This is something that can and must be done. The vast majority of Americans, I think, support the kinds of legislation that we've already passed through the House of Representatives. Things like background checks, closing the Charleston loophole. There's a few other bills that we've passed through the House, some with bipartisan support. The problem is that this is one of those issues that is so polarizing that we're hardly even able to have a conversation about them. And without that conversation, in a constructive, meaningful way where we can bring different perspectives to the table, we'll never begin to make progress, and our country will continue to be at war with itself. And unfortunately, we will continue to therefore not get to the root cause of so many of these problems, why this trend is moving terribly in the wrong direction, and whether it's those school shootings that we're unfortunately seeing in the headlines, or those shootings that are happening on the streets of cities like Chicago, where kids are getting shot as they're walking to school, but who never make it into the news. There are so many different things that are contributors to this trend of terrible violence that's taking innocent people's lives. We've got to come together as a country to be able to solve them. Yes, some of it has to do with passing this gun safety legislation. Some of it has to do with making sure that we're tackling the gang violence that is causing such harm in some of our communities. Some of it has to do with dealing with the lack of mental health professionals, both in our schools and in our communities. I recently introduced legislation in Congress specific to school shootings because we were asking this question ourselves, or what are the trends? What's the information that we're getting from the different school shootings that have occurred, so that we can start to answer these questions informed by data and facts and information. What we found was no one is collecting any of this information. No one is talking to the teachers at these schools and saying, okay, well, tell us what actually happened here. You know, especially if the shooter came from the school. Were there any red flags? There were things that maybe caught your eye, but no one really thought anything of it. You know, there are real questions that should be asked and answered here, so this bill begins to set that platform to be able to gather the information so we can have an informed conversation as a country, to make it so that our families, our parents, our kids are not afraid to leave their house in the morning. Thank you so much for bringing your voice to this conversation. Sorry, I know they said we're done, but let's take one last. Yes, ma'am, you here in the back.
Hi, Tulsi. My name's Jessica Davidson, and I've also been serving in the military for over 16 years, and thank you for your service.
What branch of service are you in?
I've been in all 3 branches of the Air Force. I'm currently active Air National Guard.
Awesome. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. My question is in regards to TRICARE, military families and retirees. And we just sent a message out last week that TRICARE rates are continuing to increase again for 2020, and active duty and AGRs, both in the Guard and the Reserve, have the luxury of getting benefits immediately when they retire. However, if you serve 20, 30 plus years in the National Guard, unfortunately you have to wait until age 60 to receive those benefits, including medical. And my thought for you is if there's any way to address maybe additional benefits, at least for retirees, for National Guard, in regards to veteran status.
Yeah. Thank you. These are issues I'm very familiar with. I think there's Look, there's a few different things that we can and should do to honor the service of those in the National Guard and reserves, some of which have to do with reducing the retirement age as it relates to how many years that you've served on active duty, and making sure that you are getting those benefits and that recognition of that service as a veteran. I want to talk a little bit about TRICARE, because you mentioned how the rates are continuing to increase. As we talk about this overall issue of healthcare reform, the military has not gone untouched by the high overhead of private insurance and what they're doing. There's a program called legislation that was passed called the Choice Act that we passed in Congress to be able to help serve veterans who may not be able to get care within the VA within a good period of time, or maybe don't have a VA nearby. I know that's an issue here in New Hampshire. It's an issue for us in Hawaii. And so the Choice Act was created to say, okay, well, you can go and get the care that you need from your local physician or hospital, and the VA will pay for it. Makes sense, right? Unfortunately, in the execution of it, they contracted with TRICARE to administer this, which increased the administrative costs tremendously and added many, many, many layers of bureaucracy, so that bottom line, you had to go and call this person and that person, get that document signed and that approval signed just before you could even get an appointment with a doctor in your local community, and then still go through many layers of red tape to be guaranteed that the bill would be paid for by the VA. So as we look at this overall question of healthcare reform, it's important that we not leave our veterans and our servicemen and women behind, in making sure that you and our brothers and sisters in uniform get the care and the benefits and the honor that you have earned through your service and your sacrifice. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm really sorry we don't have time for more questions. I want to close by introducing to you one of our incredible volunteer leaders here in New Hampshire. We have a people-powered campaign. We take no money from PACs or lobbyists or corporations, and really the fuel and the engine behind our campaign, if you see these yard signs around town, it is our volunteers who are doing tremendous work every day. I want Vince to talk about how you too can join the fun.
Hey everyone. I got the day off work today. So listen, it's pretty simple. I mean, we all have lives, but this is a people-powered campaign. So, you know, I got Noah here is looking for venues. Matt's found 2 venues already. He found this one. He's got another one lined up. Nick's been handing out literature. This is how we do it. It's us, okay? We're not going to get an army of paid staffers. So as far as Tulsi's gone, we want to go even bigger. So in my hand, I have a pledge card. You can get them in the back, and you have volunteers that's about to hand them out. If you want to commit to talking to 2 people over the next 2 days, grab one of these. We'll follow up. If you want to throw a house party, grab one of these. If you have your own ideas, we'd love to hear them. So again, I'll be brief. Tulsi has to get somewhere. There's a lot of people in this room. We want everyone to be able to take a picture. So please don't ask questions, but I'm glad to tell you that Tulsi will be back in Nashua on the 28th. So we'll start a line this way, and we'll exit this way, and now I'll give it back to Tulsi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vince. Thank you all for your time and being here. I appreciate your consideration, and I hope to have your vote. Thank you very, very much. Have a good night. Aloha. I want to say thanks to Steve Cook, who's our amazing audio guy. Thank you, Steve. Raise your hand. Where are you at? There you go. Thank you very much. It's great to see you again. Aloha.
Our dreams, and they are made out of real things, like a shoebox of photographs with sepia tone loving. Love is the answer, at least, for most of the questions in my heart. Why are we here, and where do we go, and how come it's so hard? It's not always easy, and sometimes life can be deceiving. I'll tell you one thing, it's always better when we're together.